It's good to see everybody this morning. Kind of a little wet Sunday morning, but we thank God for the rain. We thank God that we can be here to worship Him and glorify His name because it is the Lord's day. And we want to give praise and honor to our King Jesus. I want you to know that everything went well at the lectures. They didn't stone me or anything. That went fine. Saw a lot of people who have connections with this great church. Saw Brother Ken Wellifer, Sister Norma, and they send their love. Brother Ken is certainly enjoying his time in the ministry, getting to travel and be with the grandkids. So I got to see him. Saw Brother Andrew and Julie. We had lunch with them on one day, and we actually had lunch a couple of days. Andrew and I did. So we enjoyed getting to talk with them and catch up. Saw Shane Scott. Got to see Brother Shane Scott. And a few other people who have connections with this great church. And when I go to places like that and I see so many good preachers, and I think about how many of them got their start here, it just brings a lot of joy to my heart, knowing that this church for many years invested in the gospel and helping me and preach the gospel. And so God bless all of you for that. How about we have a word of prayer this morning to start out? Brother Dick, I locked eyes with you, so would you mind lead us in a prayer this morning, sir? Amen. Thank you, Brother Dick. One of the person I did want to mention that he specifically told me to tell, he said, I can't list all the people that I love there because there's so many. But it was Frederick Gray. Y'all know Frederick, right? I ran to Frederick one day, and man, you can always just feel when Frederick's around. He's got 6 kids. I told him, I said, man, you can really help a church attendance number, y'all's big family. But we ran into Frederick. And Frederick just said, man, I just love so many people out there. And please tell the folks there that I love them so much. So I did want to let you know that Frederick sends his love also. All right, we're going to be on page 9, if I'm not mistaken, Brother Matt. We are going into a transition period today. We're going to finish up, just take a few minutes to finish up this lesson 4. And then Matt is going to be taking the lead from here on because the rest of the lessons are lessons that he specifically put together. So he'll be taking we're going to kind of swap up as far as that goes. We were looking at 4 simple things that any Christian can do to do evangelism. And we looked at last time the need to shine. When we say shine, we're basically saying what? Let your light shine, which means every day we need to just what? Just be an example. Just live right. Live a Christian life. Stand out in this world. If you do that, you can maybe get some conversations going and make people curious. So you shine. You speak. In other words, you find ways to sprinkle spiritual things in your daily conversations. Give praise to God. Give glory to God. Tell people you're praying for them. Do things like that. That should be a natural thing for us to do if we're really excited about Jesus. And then we kind of left off last time on invite. And we looked at John 1:46, where Philip told Nathanael, when Nathanael said, what good thing can come out of Nazareth, what did Philip tell him to do? Come and see. A simple invitation, and the result of that simple invitation ended in what? In a what? A conversion. Philip invited, Jesus taught. Team evangelism. So let's think about that in our daily lives as far as inviting. And let me just say that the invitation doesn't do very well if you don't do the first two things. If you don't shine, how's your invitation to invite someone to come here going to go? If you don't live it, why won't it go good? Because what? Exactly, nothing different about you. In fact, it may make them look at you even worse because you're inviting them to church, but they never would have thought you even went to church. You know what I'm saying? I think I had a buddy of mine tell me one time that one of the worst things he ever heard from somebody, and he was in college, he was a Christian, and he invited someone to services, and they said to him, I never would have thought you were a Christian. That stings, doesn't it? That's the one thing you never want to hear if you're a Christian, right? That I never would have thought you were a Christian. That means that invitation's not going to go so well, huh? So you got to live. You got to shine if the invite's going to work. And secondly, you also have to be kind of building things up a little bit. If you are telling people you're praying for them, if they're going through something, if you're saying, I give glory to God for my family, and if you tell people I got to work hard, I'm not going to be unethical on my job because I'm a disciple, if you say those kinds of things, then naturally the invitation will be a natural thing. But if you never talk about God, if you never say, talk about prayer, if you never talk about those things, then you just bust out with an invite one day, that's not going to be as powerful. Does that make sense? But it's more natural when you're talking about spiritual stuff and people know every day that you're at least a religious person. So I think it becomes more natural as far as that goes. Matt, you have anything on this, buddy?
Nope, with you on all that, brother.
So does anybody have any comments about the invite before we go on? Anything at all about the invite part? There are some things to think about. We got something coming up real soon. What's coming up? We got a big event coming up. Teen Weekend. So especially our teenagers who are not in here, they have their the college and obviously high school and junior high have their own class. But parents, we need to be encouraging them to invite because this is a great opportunity, and they can definitely do evangelism right now. Next month, we got something else coming up. What's going on next month here? Men's Weekend. Invite again. There you go. So we have special events coming up, always great opportunities for invites, just regular worship services. Nothing wrong with that. Keep doing that. In fact, to help you with that, on the table in the lobby, and I've noticed a lot of them are gone, so we may need to order some more. We got the little cards. Y'all know what I'm talking about, the little invite cards? On the cards has service times, address, and on the back, you can just write your name in the little box. Like this is a personal invitation from whoever. And you can give it to somebody. You can leave it in the with your money at the restaurant. Make sure you leave a good tip when you do that. But those things are easy. I mean, Janicia and we do that all the time, especially Janicia. You go to Walmart and if you give the cashier one. But those things are really simple to do. Just give somebody a personal invitation. Billy was telling me something about a week ago that stood out to me. And Billy, I hope you don't mind me sharing it. And Billy, correct me if I'm wrong on this, but you said you've invited many people to services and maybe only one time you've had somebody tell you no thank you because this person had a church, right? And that's the worst thing that's happened, right, Billy? Nobody assaulted you. No one cursed you. No one cut your hand off. The worst that happened was someone says, no, thank you. That's the worst, right? And that's typically what I have found too, Billy, is maybe one or two times I've had someone say, no, thank you. And we can deal with that. That's not bad, right? Brother Spud, yes, sir. Yes.
The success of that act will depend on the congregation for their business.
And that's a perfect transition.
They come, they leave, and that's it.
Yep.
Nobody
And that's a perfect transition, Brother Spud. Perfect transition. Let's look at the last one here, which is welcome. Perfect. That's right on the money. All right, so let's talk about this first practically. When you're invited to somebody's home, and let's have a little discussion on this. How do you want somebody to treat you? Imagine this. I invite you to my home. And you get there, you come in, and let's say you get there a little bit before me, but my wife is there, and she's in the kitchen cooking. And when I come in, you're already sitting on the couch. And I don't even speak to you. I just walk right by you. And I don't shake your hand, I don't say hi. I just come right in, and I go to my bedroom, and I start watching ESPN or something. Janicia says, well, the food is ready. So we all go, and we're getting the food, and I get my plate, and I go back to the bedroom. I don't even sit with you at the table. I don't even acknowledge you. So you're kind of just sitting there by yourself. And let's say Janicia also, her and the kids, they go down into the basement, and they watch TV down there, and you're just kind of sitting at the table by yourself eating. And then 30 minutes go by, and nobody said anything to you. And then we just come and say, well, thanks for coming, and you leave. Would you want to come back to my house? Why wouldn't you want to come back? You don't feel welcome, do you? You don't feel welcome when somebody invites you to their home and they're not nice to you, right? You don't feel welcome when someone invites you into their home and they don't speak to you, acknowledge you, give you some attention, right? We understand that, don't we? So what about when it comes to inviting people here? Do you think the same principle applies, right? I want to just say this last thing, Matt, and maybe you want to chime in here. I have been places, and maybe y'all have too, where even as the visiting preacher, you didn't feel like people were, valued you being there. I remember visiting a place one time, and it was out in Florida. I sat down in this pew. I was getting ready to preach. I was there to preach. Lady says to me, you need to get up. This is my pew. And I'm thinking she's joking, right? I'm smiling. She's like, no, I'm serious. This is my pew. And guess what I did? We all got up and moved. She was dead serious. You go places sometimes and you sit in the wrong pew, people will tell you to get up. Like, this is my pew. Like, really, like my name is on it. You go some places sometimes and people may not shake your hand, be nice, thank you for coming. I've been places like that. Y'all ever been places like that before? Let me just say this last thing because Bud's got a comment. I just want to say this. When it comes to this church is so great at welcoming people. I want to commend this church. Y'all are just so great, and I mean that. Every time I go somewhere, people say that church is so friendly. That's a friendly church. So we're not saying this point to rebuke or chastise this church. That's not the point. Y'all do a great job. We're just bringing this up because we got to keep working at it. We got to keep being conscious of it. That's the point. Even though we do a good job, we want to always excel. So I don't want nobody to take this the wrong way. I'm just saying that this does matter. Spud, and then Matt may have something. Go ahead, Spud.
You use the word visitors too frequently. Means when somebody comes that doesn't come regularly, we call them visitors.
Right.
I call them worship.
Yeah.
They have not been here in several months. They're from another congregation, and they hear the work. But instead of a visitor, let's welcome them to our worship service. You are a worshiper. You're not only a visitor.
Right. That's a great point. Absolutely. Anybody else have anything on this point here? Y'all know what I'm talking about? So the point is, does this really matter? Go to 1 Corinthians 14. 1 Corinthians 14, there is something in the Bible about how you treat people who may be guests or visitors in the assembly. And remember, the Corinthians dealt with this a little bit. And this was one of the problems they had when it came to them not doing things decently and in order, Paul wanted to make the point that the stuff y'all are doing that's messed up, it has an impact on those who visit, especially those who are non-believers. So in verse 23, or 1 Corinthians 14, Paul says, if therefore the whole church comes together and all speak in tongues, and outsiders or unbelievers enter, notice they're visiting here, will they not say you are out of your minds? But if all prophesy and an unbeliever and an outsider comes in, he is convicted by all, he is called to account by all. The secrets of his hearts are disclosed, and so fall on his face he will worship God and declare that God is really among you. What is the principle being laid out there, someone? What's the principle? What principle is Paul establishing here when it comes to people, especially non-believers, who visit our worship assemblies? Don't overthink it. It's very simple. What's the principle? Yes, sir. So if they're not as knowledgeable about what's going on, what does that mean for us? How should we conduct ourselves always? Is Paul saying here, does it matter what we do when it comes to visitors? Is that the point he's making? That's the point. It matters how you behave. It matters what you do. It matters if you're being an example even here, because that impacts visitors. It impacts guests. Particularly here, Paul says, if y'all are all speaking in tongues and stuff and nobody is all disordered and nobody understands what's going on, people are going to think y'all crazy. That's not going to be a good look. You have to be aware that what you do here not only impacts ourselves, but it also can impact people we're trying to bring to Christ. That's his point. And so I think that's a good principle there. That's something we need to be mindful of, because not only will we get guests who are Christians, like Brother Spud is talking about, who come from Alabama, who come from other parts of the country, and they're just passing through on vacation or something, and they need somewhere to worship. That's true. But sometimes we get who else coming up in here? We get unbelievers coming up in here. We get people who are not churched, who are not Christians, who are maybe visiting a congregation for the first time. Maybe it's Easter or something, or Mother's Day, and we trying to reach them too. So it matters how we do. That's why it's important that we always do things by the Bible, that we be nice, that we treat people right, because what we do here can be the first step in bringing somebody to Christ, right? So I just have a few practical things I want to say about what we can do, and then I'm going to turn it over to Matt. Here are some things to think about as far as reaching the things we can do today, starting today. And some of you already do these things, but let's keep doing them. To make guests feel welcomed and eager to come back, because we want them to come back, right? And we especially want the unbelievers or the non-Christians who live in our community to come back. Because the people passing through going to Alabama, we're glad they're here. God bless you if you're here today. If you're just passing through, we want you to feel welcome. We are happy that you're here. But you're just passing through, right? You're passing through. But there are people in Columbia who are not just passing through. They're looking for a church, and they may not be Christians. And we want them to keep on coming every week. They ain't just passing through. So how do we make them feel welcome? How do we make them want to come back? Yes, ma'am.
I've learned that it's important that you acknowledge them and you're friendly, but don't overwhelm them and ask them like 100 questions.
Oh, good point. Put yourself in their shoes, especially if you never go, to a church. You don't want 50 people asking you a bunch of questions. At least I do. That makes me feel like, okay, this is too much. Okay, this is way too much. Either, these people are interrogating me, or they're just like really happy to have a guest right now. They must not never get guests because they're like just bombarding me right now. So you're right about that. I agree. So you got to use some judgment, right? But you do want to make them feel welcome. So how do we do that? Well, it could be something as simple as first, right after service is over, do what I like to refer to as, and what other preachers refer to as, the 10-minute rule. You ever heard the 10-minute rule? For the first 10 minutes, you look for a guest and go talk to a guest for a little bit, or for a few guests. Because typically, right when the closing prayer happens, what do we like to do? Some of us like to run out. Yeah, you always got a few just they go on to the court. But for other people, like look at like everybody's sitting right now by the people they really like usually. You got the church over here and the church over here, right? That's what we say around here. So everybody's sitting by the people they really like, and usually right when the closing prayer happens, what's the first thing? Who the first people we talk to? The people who are sitting right by us. The people we talk to all the time. That's who we talk to. Let's change that. You're going to talk to them people all the time. They ain't going nowhere. Go find a guest. Talk to a guest. Make the guest feel special. Say, thank you for coming. My name is, what's your name? What brings you our way? So that makes people feel special. Listen to them. You know, ask questions and listen. Sometimes people just want to be listened to. When they come in, if you notice before service starts in a little bit, go introduce yourself to them. Get them a bulletin. You have a bulletin. And then maybe even invite them to sit by you. I don't know about you, but when I go places and you know, visit, I feel a little nervous. Especially, you know, I'm just there passing through on vacation or something. And it makes you feel good when a visitor comes in. And I mean, when a member says, a bulletin, do y'all have anybody you're sitting by? Well, you can come sit with us. See, when you do those kinds of things, how do you think that makes people feel? Makes them feel welcome, don't it? Make them feel special. You think somebody want to come back after getting treated like that? Yeah, I think so too. Yes, ma'am. Yes. Thanks for being here. You got a bullet. Yeah. That ain't going to go well, right? You got to have some positive vibes in you. They got to look at you and see, hey, you're a friendly person. You're happy in your life. You're happy about being at this church, right? That goes a long way, Carolyn. So make sure when you do it, you have a good attitude. I agree 100%. Anybody else have something as far as this goes? Please feel free to. Y'all looking at us crazy right now. Anybody else have anything? Yes, sir. Go ahead, man.
One thing that's on my mind is make this about them, not about you.
Right.
We are not talking to them so we can check our welcomed visitors box.
Right.
That we are talking to them because we want them to feel special and loved.
Absolutely.
And that means, you know, if somebody is headed right straight out the door, don't try to chase them down. Give them what it seems like they want. When you're talking to them, read them. Pay attention to whether they seem interested in talking to you, and if not, then just let them go. Say, glad you're here.
Right. You know, and let me just add to that, you know, sometimes if we're not careful, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead, forgive me. Yes, it does. No, that's a great point. It reminds me of a funny story. And you know, sometimes this can backfire a little bit. Let me tell you what I mean. When I had moved here back in 2012, about 3 years later, maybe that was 15, and there was a sister, and I don't see the sister here, so I hope she keep this story between us if she knows what I'm talking about. But I went up to her. And I said, thank you for visiting. Thank you for visiting today. Appreciate you being here. She said, I've been here 40 years. I was like, oh, man. So maybe I was the problem. I didn't get to know the sister better. But be careful on that, too, you know. And that position, all you can say is, I'm an idiot. You know, that's all you can say. But no, you're right, Angela. You know, that kind of stuff goes a long way, and especially with newly converted people. When people come and introduce themselves to you and try to get to know you, that makes you want to keep coming back and makes you feel part of the family, right? So those are all good points. So again, this church does such a great job with this. I know I'm speaking to the choir, but these are just things to keep being conscious of, because you never know who's going to pop in those doors on a particular Sunday. And you never know what opportunities are going to fall into our lap, and how we conduct ourselves in those moments could be the difference between spiritual life and death. Okay? So does anybody else have anything as we close that off? Yes, sir, Dr. Clifford. Go ahead, sir. Yes. I was going to say that. That's exactly right. We have a team here led by Brother Carl. A lot of great greeters, and that's a blessing. I want to commend all those folks and the young people who are involved in that also. I also want to say this, that even though that group does a fantastic job, let's make sure we also do our part too, even if we're even not part of that team. You know what I'm saying? Because we want to spread that spirit throughout the church. But absolutely, Dr. Clifford, we have a fantastic group of people who do that, and I certainly want to commend them. So if there's not anything else, I'm going to turn it over to Matt now. We're going to go to lesson number 5. Lesson 5, page 10 in the book.
Yes, indeed we are. And I want to start off talking about this by recalling your minds to something that Sean and I mentioned at the beginning of this quarter, which is that the theme of this class, like much of everything else that we're going to be doing here, is stepping up, right? And so it's not like we ordered these topics randomly, that we didn't just say, oh, I'll throw a dart at the dartboard and this one's going to be lesson 5. Instead, the way that we conceive this is you start at the bottom with prayer, right? Because every Christian can pray. Then maybe you feel a little bit more comfortable, so you talk about God in your life. You invite people to services. What we're talking about here is, I think, the next step up. This is about, okay, I'm moving beyond just sort of participating in the work that the whole church does. I am going to start stepping up myself. I am going to start doing things myself that are going to make me personally a better evangelist. And the first item on this list is hospitality. So let's open our Bibles to Hebrews chapter 13, and there we'll read verse 2. And Sean, just as you did for me, whenever you've got something, just lob it on in there. Hebrews 13 and verse 2. Volunteer to read it. Hebrews 13, 2. Anybody willing to read the one verse with no names? All right, Brother Smith.
Be not forgetful to entertain strangers, for thereby some have entertained angels unaware.
Right. So what the first question here in our lesson on page 10 asks is, what are Christians instructed to do in this verse? What does this mean? Why does the writer tell us to do this? Should we really be expecting this? And if not, what's the point? So, what's the basic command here? Do what? Yes. Show hospitality to whom? Strangers. And it's kind of interesting because if you go back in the Greek and look at what the Greek word is here, it's xenophilia, which means literally love of strangers. So you're supposed to show love of strangers to strangers. So what does this mean for us? When we're talking about Bible hospitality, how does this differ from maybe a more general way that we might be thinking about hospitality? Is there a difference between what we're told to do here and what we might normally think of as hospitality? Wayne?
Yeah, yeah. Great point.
I think that's definitely part of it, because there's even a text where Jesus talks about when you invite people into your house, don't invite the people who will invite you back so you're repaid in that way. Invite those who can't repay you so you can be repaid at the resurrection of the righteous. So this is not primarily self-centered. And when we're doing that sort of reciprocal hospitality thing, who is it that we're normally inviting?
Normally someone that we know a little bit but want to get to know better, and here seems to be more of showing hospitality to someone that we don't really know at all.
So it could be people we just want to get to know better. But when I think about who most people have in their homes, it's not even really acquaintance types. Like, for instance, over the holidays, who was it that most of us, either we were in somebody else's home or they were in ours? Who was it? Family. So we are likely to be in the homes of our families. What are some other people that are like that, where we're just kind of in their home on a regular basis, maybe? Yes, yeah, your close friends. So if your families, your friends, as Wayne said, that tends to be tit for tat. Is that really what we're talking about in Hebrews 13:2? No. Instead, it's more like what Landon mentioned, where you have somebody you really don't know very well at all. Ben?
I think it all pretty much has to do with comfort zones. And let's face it, to begin with, hospitality puts you a little bit out of your comfort zone, regardless of who it is that's coming over. You've got to clean up, you've got to prepare stuff, you want to put your best foot forward. So you're already a little bit out of your comfort zone. But the people you're most naturally inclined to be comfortable with after that are family, and then friends, and brethren, and so on. And so it progressively gets less and less familiar to where we get to this, where it's strangers, and it's the most uncomfortable situation. But when we look at the New Testament examples of the things that went on, even there's quite a few Old Testament examples too, the way that Jesus and the apostles interacted with other people, very, very infrequently was their interaction going to be comfortable. That's really not our example, but I think so often, because hospitality already puts us out of our comfort zone, we want to be as least uncomfortable as possible, so we have the easiest to have over people we can.
And I think all that is great, Ben. And just to clarify, is there anything wrong with having our families into our homes? No. Is there anything wrong with having people we worship with and know well into our homes? Is there anything wrong with that, having brethren over? No. But as Ben said, this is really, that kind of thing is really on the opposite end of the spectrum from what we're talking about here in Hebrews 13. That here this seems to be about people we don't know well at all, and yet we're bringing them into our homes anyway. Billy.
Right.
As with any biblical subject, there's a lot of bleed over to other categories, isn't it? As far as we know, the parable of the Good Samaritan had nothing to do with the guy's home, but was he expressing love for strangers? Yeah, and I think that gets back to what Sean was talking about with our need to shine. Think of this as kind of a subset of shining, what we have to do with our homes, what we have to do with sharing meals with people and that sort of thing. So your point is well taken, brother. Larry.
This is not for everybody, but I think there's a lot of synergy involved in knowing that we have to strengthen the home, we have to
Absolutely. There are, all the way through this, I like what a lot of you are saying, because you're making clear that this is not like its own little distinct ice cube in the ice cube tray, right? That this is something that can have a lot of bleed over. That if you invite a Christian family that you've known for years over, and then also somebody who just happened to visit that Sunday, are you still practicing hospitality? Yes. And having that Christian friend there, depending on how much they are happy talking with strangers, that may well even make your hospitality more effective. So that's a good point. Back to the text, though. Why does the writer tell us that we are supposed to show hospitality to strangers? What's the reason back there in Hebrews 13 and verse 2? Don't neglect to show hospitality to strangers because what? Yes, that some have entertained angels without knowing it. Should we really be expecting this? Are we going to invite a visitor to our home for Sunday dinner, and then all of a sudden they start glowing and vanish in a blaze of light? Is that something we're anticipating?
Matt, it does remind me of an Old Testament example a little bit. Y'all know. Does it remind you of one? Which one? Somebody did that in the Old Testament. Abraham. So I'm just wondering if could that be? I'm not saying literally that would happen today, but could that have been referred to that's something that the writers thought about.
Yes,
here,
that I think is the story that the writer is referring to.
I just thought
and
that was
I think also the story of the birth of Samson when Manoah and his wife, the angel shows up and they feed.
So there were some who literally did that.
Yes, this literally happened. I don't know that I would really be expecting that to happen. So even if we're not going to get visits from heavenly beings, though, what's the point? Tony? Yes. Yes. And what Tony said is that he thinks that this, on a more general level, is that you're doing something that pleases God. And how significant would it be to even somebody in the Old Testament, much less us today, how significant would it be to show hospitality to somebody and find out that that was an angel? Little deal, big deal what? That is a great big deal. And so, Dr. Clifford.
Recently heard the tourism lady for Nashville speak, and she told us to show hospitality to all visitors. I can't have all these visitors in my home, but I can show hospitality to by greeting them, solving any problems that they have. That could be the way that I can. Maybe if they're in buying some gas or something. I mean, just you can show hospitality a lot of ways besides having.
Sure.
And, it may be that simply because your home is not set up for entertaining, that if there is a visitor to our assembly, then you just say, hey, come on down to Applebee's or whatever, and I'll buy you lunch and we can get to know each other. So there are lots of creative ways that we can carry out this command. And that's a point well taken, brother. But back to this idea of entertaining the angels without knowing it. So if entertaining an angel is a very significant event, even if you don't know that that's what you're doing at the time, can the same thing be true if we are entertaining somebody who's a non-angel? Can that be really significant, much more significant than we think at the time? Yes, sir.
You can't get away from Matthew 25 and say, Lord, when did we see you?
Absolutely. In fact, look at the next question. You will see that you and I are on exactly the same page. So, there is eternal significance to that, but even just in the here and now, what might make having somebody in our home for a meal a very significant event? What might that open the door for? Anna?
I was just going to make this point for Roland. Meeting somebody and then saying, I'm hungry, or giving them money to a meal is different than saying, well, come on over to my house. We're having lunch or dinner anyway, and I'm sure we'll have enough. Or maybe if you stop by the store on my home and get some extra stuff on my home for dinner. The conversation you have during that meal is much more significant than here's $20 for you to talk.
That is true. And I think what you are getting at there is we have a tendency in our very wealthy society to want to throw money at the problem, don't we? That if we can just write a check and we think fulfill our obligation, then we will do that. Is that necessarily the best way to fulfill Bible commandments is by writing a check? No. I mean, some things that is the best way. If we're helping with famine relief on another continent, then yes, probably writing a check is the best way to handle that problem. But when it comes to helping people, I think there is something that is much more powerful for us to contribute than just money. And what might that be? Our time, and even more fundamentally, when I sit down and share a meal with somebody, who am I really sharing? You're sharing yourself. You are personally invested in doing this. And that is almost always going to be much more powerful than a simple contribution of money. So that's a good point, Anna. And I think that that down that road lies the point that I wanted to make, which is that when we bring somebody into our home and we share that meal with them and we share ourselves with them, that can have a much greater impact on people than we might think. I mean, I do not know how many people I have baptized, and the whole process started with having them in my home. That even though it is something as simple as a meal and a conversation that's over in an hour or two, this is something that can make an eternal difference in somebody's lives.
I think that's such a great point, because I've seen the same thing. I firmly believe in the philosophy that sometimes people won't listen to what you say unless they first know you care. And when people know you care about them, and hospitality shows that at a very high level, then they can find themselves, and you can find them being more receptive when you want to talk to them about spiritual things, because they know you care about them. So I think that's where I personally see the value in this, is letting people know before we even go to the Bible stuff, I care about you. I want to help you. I care about you as a person. And I have seen that take a lot of the defense mechanism out of people right away, that you cared about them. And usually when I've done that, Matt, to go what you're saying, I've had that open door to teach after that.
That is exactly right, brother. That is my experience too. Because so often, I think what keeps us from evangelism, and you'll see this all the way across the board, is that we're afraid. And what we're afraid of is we're afraid of being hurt. That we're going to present something to somebody, and we care very much about this thing, and we're afraid that they're going to minimize it and so minimize us. And so you have this fear. But when we spend time with people, that is when we see that we have nothing to fear from them, and they see that they have nothing to fear from us. Right. Charlie? That is exactly right. We must remember, first of all, that as always, the Lord is watching. And second of all, Charlie, I think the idea that you're really getting at here is the idea of stewardship, isn't it? And we will talk a lot about stewardship, won't we? That this is something that we'll say. Everything we have is a blessing. It's a gift from God. It all belongs to Him. Even if technically my name is on the deed, this belongs to God if He needs it. But what if what God really needs us to do, what if God really wants us to do, is to use this home that we have for some godly purpose, and then we don't do it? At that point, does that look so much like gratitude? And obviously there are times when that is not possible. I know there are people here whose health simply doesn't permit them to entertain, because, as Ben observed, it's a lot of work to get ready to have somebody over. But to the extent that we can do this, I think this is something that we ought to be looking to do, among other reasons, because it shows gratitude to God as the one who gave us all these blessings in the first place. Anybody else? Yes, sir. Harvey.
It seems like here that he's talking to Christians
Yes.
In a large congregation, you can have people that may be a stranger to each other. But like what he's stressing here is to love everybody equally, even those that you don't know.
I think that is fair, brother. That specifically here we're talking about hospitality shown toward non-Christians. But it's just as possible, isn't it, to be hospitable toward Christians if these are people whom we don't know and we want a better relationship with them. So even the topic of hospitality is broader than this lesson. So I think that's a great point. Anybody else? Tony? Well, maybe I just didn't represent you well, but go on.
God put these angels in their lives for a reason. And I think God puts people in contact with us for a reason. When we show hospitality to these people, then we're taking part in God's purpose.
Exactly. And are we any doubt about God's ultimate desire for everybody? What does God want all men to do, according to 1 Timothy? Be saved and come to a knowledge of the truth. So if there is somebody in our life, then I don't think we have to doubt that God wants us to try to bring them to Christ, and that God intends us to be the instrument for that if possible. So is that closer to what you mean, Tony? And sometimes it is very obvious just what God wants us to do. For instance, there's a brother back in Joliet named Alfredo. I don't remember if I've told this story, but Alfredo showed up at services one morning, and I was talking to him, saying, all right, well, thank you for visiting. Why are you here? And he said, well, I found this book called Muscle and a Shovel, and I read it, and that convinced me that I needed not to be a Catholic anymore. And I needed to try to go seek out a Church of Christ. And then I looked across the street, and I realized that church building across the street from my home was a Church of Christ, so I've come to see all of you. That this is literally true. This is somebody who was reading Muscle and a Shovel and lived across the street from the church building. And I studied with him, and later he obeyed the gospel. So sometimes it's pretty obvious when God has his finger on the scale, isn't it? But I think we can assume that when it comes to anybody, that's an opportunity that God wants us to take advantage of. Anybody else? All right. You have anything, Sean?
Now, I just one verse that keeps popping in my mind is Galatians 6:10. Let us do good to all men. While we have opportunity, let us do good to all men, especially those of the household of faith. And that's really what you're talking about here. You know, I wrote down 2 words on this question that stood out to me, Matt, if you don't mind. One was impact. Hospitality gives us such a great opportunity to impact people in a positive way. And then I wrote down opportunity, and you've been saying that.
Absolutely.
So I agree totally with this.
And let me single out one of those things that you mentioned, and that's the idea of impact. Anybody have any idea how often the average American has somebody in their home? How many times a year? 1 time. And so if we make a practice of being hospitable, that is a really easy way to shine in a culture that is not.
Absolutely.
So bear that in mind. We'll pick up with question 2 in Matthew 25 next Sunday. Thank you.